You're listening to episode 388 of the Major Issues Podcast, and on this episode, we do a deep dive into The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened. The Major Issues Podcast starts right now. Hello, everybody out there in comic book land. My name is George Serrano, aka The Don. If you're listening to this, you can only be here for one reason. It's a brand new episode of the Major Issues Podcast, brought to you each and every week by ComicBookClique.com. And as always, I am never alone. Sir, if you could please introduce yourself.
It's me, Alex Garcia, aka The Cog. The comic OG has gotten schooled. And we're here to talk about it.
Yes, I have the Cog here. I'm full of coffee. There's a lot going on. But there was a documentary that I really wanted you to check out, Cog. You were able to do it for me. We're here to talk about it today. It is The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened? One of the longest titles for a documentary.
With a question mark. With a question mark.
And this is about the failed Superman Lives film. So there's like a million reasons why I wanted to tackle this. One, we have a Superman film coming out in a month.
We do?
Yeah, actually, in the terms of like if you're doing the Amazon screening, you'll be able to see Superman in 2 weeks. So there's that going on.
I can't do Tuesday. The earliest I got was Thursday. It was Thursday. That's the earliest I can get.
I am mad at you. So yeah, that I didn't even realize the documentary is 10 years old. So it's a 10-year anniversary of the documentary. Unfortunately, the director of the documentary, Jon Schnepp, he passed away in 2018, 3 years after this had came out. That's kind of what put it on the radar for me, because he was doing a lot of work for Collider roughly when I was starting Comic Book Clique, and he seemed like a very knowledgeable and also a very welcoming and energetic voice there. Never really one to like trash on, like a lot of those sites became places where people just do like edgy content and dunk on things, and John always seemed very energetic and positive about this sort of about our medium, so what we like to talk about, comic books and comic book media. So it's a 10-year anniversary of that. And then like we're constantly, because we are trying to be on the cusp of the news, we're constantly talking about the production and production woes of television series, of movies, of movie franchises. You try not to, but I usually am on the up and up with that kind of stuff, because it's like
that's you.
But not only that, the layman, the common man is now filled to the brim with knowledge that they never really needed, right? That's going to inform their viewing experience. It's gonna inform their viewing experience almost unfairly, right? Because if you were to go into a film without knowing anything about it, and you watch it and you're like, oh, it had some issues and it is what it is. But if you went into a movie and I'm like, listen, I need you to tell you, this movie was shot, then it was edited, then it was reshot again, the director died, and they brought another director in. And, if you had all this other homework in your head about the film, you could possibly just enjoy it less. So I wanted to discuss this documentary because I wanted to kind of lay out how wrong studios can be in the direction of profit, in the direction of this worked before, in the direction of not really understanding these IPs. And I think the most tragic part about what we're going to be talking about today is that this is the most recognizable IP in the world. And the idea that at one point in the 90s, they could just not nail it down is absolutely, it's hilarious. It's tragic. There's a million words to say. But I wanted to ask you, as somebody who hadn't watched this film before, what was your takeaway? How did you leave? The viewing experience. How did all that work out for you?
First off, I was angry because I mean, to hear this story and to know what was put into it, to have it go nowhere, angered me. It's a lot of work that went into this from many, many different people, a lot of whom I very much respect. And I gained a lot of respect for this man right here. To do this, even, it was tragic. And that's how, and then so I got angry. I went through like the stages of denial. You know, it's like angry and then sad because I don't know if you guys know this. I really love comic books,
Do
and
you?
I remember, yeah,
So
that's
you were
news
the
to me.
Cookie OG.
Yeah.
This
I
whole
love
time.
Cookie too. Oh, C for Cookie. I love it all day.
Gang.
But no, so like to have this, to see this, and to see what was just left, especially since I feel very manipulated too, because I remember all the reports, well, not all the reports, because I learned a lot more from this documentary, but I remember many of the reports on this movie kind of pushed my feelings on this movie a certain way.
Yeah.
And now watching this, I made me realize, like, I feel like a victim. Like, no, I had it wrong. I had it wrong.
There's an interesting part of the documentary, not getting too ahead of ourselves, where Jon Schnepp says that, like he would be approached at cons and stuff about this film, or he'll talk to people about it. Like, what do you know about it? And they'll be like, oh, it was some trashy, cheap bullshit kind of movie with Nick Cage. And then he'd like show them Nick Cage in the suit and they'd be like, oh, that doesn't even look that bad. And all of a sudden wheels start turning. I think a lot of us just kind of, out of sight, out of mind. This movie wasn't made, so it had to have been trash. It had to have never been good. It had to, you make up your own excuses kind of about it. I would love eventually for them to come out with a documentary about George Miller's Justice League, because that was another thing that he was kind of gearing up for in the early 2000s before he started doing Mad Max and all that kind of stuff. Again, they had already casted certain members of the Justice League already and did like shots and stuff like that. It just never came to be. But this is a documentary that's chock full of information that I don't think we would have gotten had Jon Schnepp not made this documentary. It didn't seem like DC ever cared to tell the audience what happened. And I'm also amazed, and this is maybe even a little jealous, at the amount of access Jon was able to get, like the people he was able to get on here and the people he was able to talk to. I'm sitting here like, they let you in the crib, bro. Like you're in
the house. Yo, he's sitting in Tim Burton's house in London.
Yeah, and Brian got the sunglasses. He's just chilling. Like, so a little bit of jealous there. And then, man, Jon Peters, man, that producer is hilarious. It's talking about like bare knuckle fighting people and
and I'm sitting there like, when somebody tells too many details about something and you're like, you're saying too right. Like, okay.
You triple vetted your story and like it's almost too specific.
And no one questioned it. Like the first time, cool, you threw it in there. Bet. Yeah. After the third or fourth time, I'm like, who are you trying to convince?
He said something like, every fighter knows it's all about the look in the eye of the I'm like, what are you what is this? It almost
even
like,
I felt there were certain parts even where Schnepp I could see in his face, he's like looking at him like, I smell shit. I smell shit.
I love that he kept the part in the documentary where Peters gets a phone call. That was really funny too, because it's just like, and it just feels like a person who is so rich and so above it all, kind of making up reasons for stuff. Like kind of just like, Warner Brothers was on simultaneously on such a high from making the Batman films, right? But also a creative low because they didn't know what to do next and how to best pass off this ball. So, full spoilers, and I don't even know if this is spoilers because it's like we're almost talking about
spoilers for a corpse.
Yeah. We're going to be basically, having a educated now discussion about this absolutely failed project. But up front, The Death of Superman Lives: What Happened is a 2015 American documentary film written and directed by Jon Schnepp and produced by Holly Payne. It chronicles the behind-the-scenes events surrounding the canceled Tim Burton film Superman Lives. Funding for the documentary was partially raised through a successful Kickstarter campaign. So again, and we're seeing a little bit of that now with Kingdom Come, right? Again, like you think DC would be like, yeah, we're totally down to bankroll Alex Ross documentary about one of our most famous stories. No, go out there and make your money. See if you can raise.
But I bet you, I can't wait to watch that and discuss it here because to me that's going to make it more raw because Warner Brothers is not going to be able to dictate the story. So I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah. Because I The mandates, man. The mandates. People, these shadowy figures in ivory towers that have no touch of humanity or,
Nope.
don't have their fingers on the pulse, just making random. We'll talk about the polar bear. Making random, making random stuff. This is gonna be a funny episode. But instead of going scene by scene like I usually go with movies or comic books, I decided to go a bit like in the timeline of how this happened because I think that that's just as much a part of the story as everything else. Everything kind of compounds on itself as we go through this. So obviously we have to start off with, ironically, Superman 4, right? The Quest for Peace, 1987. Canon Films is, Roger Corman's kind of
I just want to cut you. I got to cut you off real quick.
Go.
How funny is it to talk about that considering what just happened 2 days ago?
Yes. Maybe Superman just needs to just take all the nukes and throw them into the sun. Although I would think it would kill everybody. I don't know how that would work, but to each his own.
Yeah.
But yeah, after that, all the Superman films were put on ice. This is 1987, right? So 2 years later, they'll go ahead and have Batman. Financial, commercial,
Boom.
every kind of success possible, merchandise, all that kind of stuff. So we're like, okay. They're like, oh, so how do we kind of do this kind of stuff with Superman? But simultaneously, they're having issues with it in the comics as well. They're having issues trying to sell Superman. So in 1992, quite famously, they would print The Death of Superman, which, gimmick or not, was a humongous, moment in the comic book lore for that character, humongous sales, going on at the time for that character. And when money happens, that is always a red flag and a light bulb for Warner Brothers because they're like, oh, we can do something with this. So
now we just need to get The Rock.
Yes, 100%. So now that Death of Superman is a hit as a comic, this revitalized interest in doing a modern Superman movie with a darker, edgier tone. The idea was to mirror the comic success and reintroduce the character as a mythic figure for a new generation. I think, just off the rip, this is a terrible idea. I think that similarly to The Dark Knight Returns, you can't do those stories without setting up the core of that character so that we can then be emotionally invested and invested with the change. If we don't know what the basis is, how are we going to know what the change is? And they did this, like they did Death of Superman in the second DCEU movie, in Batman v Superman. You know what I'm saying? Like right after the origin story, he gets got by Doomsday, and I've always felt like that was a mistake. It goes back to my various rants about Dark Phoenix. Do not touch that story without establishing Jean as somebody we care about, as somebody that we know in and out, so we can tell when she's being different, when she, when something else is going on. But what do you think about that? Is that just kind of how things went at that time? It was like, oh, that movie. I mean, look at Heart of Ice, right? Heart of Ice worked, and 2 years later, it's in a movie. Like, oh, we got a little bit of success here. Let's just throw all the money at that. Do you think a mid-90s film about the death of Superman could have worked?
No.
Unless it was Christopher Reeves. If it was Christopher Reeves, that would have been kind of tight, but he was not in a position to do that.
I think that's one thing that they were banking with this is the fact that, all right, everybody kind of at this point knows the origin of Superman. Mm-hmm. Superman has been an icon in American culture since the 30s. Yeah. So them so soon after Quest for Peace, I think maybe they were thinking they know this character. We're already kind of invested. So seeing him die and then come back, they're ready for it because of that, although there is no continuity. And the idea of continuity didn't exist then. It really wasn't until the MCU. And I mean, think about that. That's where somebody recognized, okay, we're going to tell part one of a 23-part story. Yeah. And that's why going from, RDJ's Tony Stark to his snap at the end of Endgame hit so hard.
Yes.
But that's what production companies don't understand, and I think that's one of the things I was fascinated with even with this documentary. This man, John Snepp, was able to get a hold of all these people except for any executives from WB. Yeah. I guarantee you he tried. Yeah. Guarantee 100%. You he tried, but no one would talk because either one, they didn't care, or two, they knew they were just going to be like, yeah, that's just what we thought. We looked at stock lines and profit lines, and that's all they cared about was, okay, when this issue came out, they made money, so therefore that's all that matters. They didn't care what came before, they didn't care what happened after. They just care, okay, this is where we're going to stay.
Yeah.
Very short-sighted. It just lacks creative uh
direction. Thank
you.
And yeah,
Thank you. That's how annoyed I am right now.
No, you're right. And the thing is, I think the most annoying part about this is it's annoying to watch them stumble as they try to make this film, but it's even more annoying to recognize similar stumbles 20 years, 30 years later.
And not just that,
Like,
to see how much of this stuff influenced other forms of media.
Yeah.
That media, to me, must have got a hold of it somehow or some way and said, look, it does work.
100%.
You can make it with proper buildup.
Yeah. There was definitely some cool concepts that we'll get into. But in 1996, so this would have been a year after they make Batman Forever. So again, a very weird time in Warner Brothers, because Batman Forever made money, but it was the first kind of creative shift, like studio creative shift of going like, we know Tim Burton, but like we need this to be more cartoony. We need it to sell more toys. So already DC's kind of putting their hands, in the pies. Warner Brothers is, to make creative changes. So they get Kevin Smith on board. Warner Brothers brings in indie wonderkin, right? Because he had just made a bunch of money with very little money. Kevin Smith on board, famously sold his comic book collection to fund Clerks. So like he has the bona fides there to do this. But his draft, he ended up writing a draft called Superman Reborn, and it's packed with like fan service and tech and comic book references because he loves Superman. In his draft, he had Doomsday as the creature that kills Superman, because that's what happens in the comics and he would know more than anyone else. A robotic assistant for Brainiac, a regeneration matrix that brings Superman back to life again, all stuff from the comics. But while this is going on, according to Kevin, now Jon Peters says this never happened, but again, with everything else that he says, I don't know how well to trust him. And simultaneously, I don't think this is something Kevin Smith would have lied about. I don't think this seems like so Hollywood that he wouldn't just lie about it, especially for not this long. I've heard this story a good couple times, but we got to talk about it here. The infamous list of demands from Jon Peters about Superman. Number 1, Superman shouldn't fly.
What?
Yeah.
I guess he was all about the original Superman, who just could leap tall buildings in a single bound. It's like sticking to the source material. Okay.
The source, but how do you do simultaneously the source material and the issue that he dies? That's 80 years of continuity somewhere in between there.
Who cares? 500 issues? We can skip that.
Yeah, screw that. He shouldn't wear his iconic suit,
which I never understood. Whenever I would hear people make fun of the underwear thing, I go, you mean the outfit he's been wearing since his inception?
Yeah.
Like, why is it only when people who know fashion, but for kids or anybody who identifies with the character? I don't know about you, but I grew up watching Superman, and never once did I think, oh, he's wearing his underwear. I was thinking he's wearing this mighty S with a banging ass cape and would always save the day. It wasn't until somebody was like, man, he's wearing his underwear on the outside, that I go, oh yeah, that's right, he is.
If anything, the underwear is just like an extra piece of cloth to get to the belt. Like, I always thought that was all one piece. Like,
that's it.
Like he just put his legs in, got his belt. It's like almost like all in one kind of encompassing thing.
Because how many people do you see wearing basketball shorts and then sweatpants underneath?
Yeah. I also don't know, I don't know how well a deconstructed Superman film would have done in the 90s. Like, what do they want him in it? Do they want the Grant Morrison, t-shirt and jeans?
Well,
kind of.
I'm not going to lie. By the end of this, though, I wouldn't have minded this being an Elseworld story, or even the idea of it being, okay, this is Tim Burton's Superman. Because really, his Batman was also Tim Burton's Batman.
100%.
A lot of people still look at those movies and go, yo, that's not my Batman. I hated, even Kevin Smith, I believe, is not a fan of Tim Burton's Batman. I am. I know you are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's our Batman. But here we are. So I wouldn't have minded seeing this. It's kind of reminded me of what we covered also, Roger Corman's Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Where it's not necessarily, had they actually been able to finish it and do it right and all give it the post-production that it deserved, it could have been a good movie. Not necessarily the definitive Fantastic Four, but a Fantastic Four movie that you can at least look back on and go, you know, that wasn't bad. And I really believe that somewhere in this, there was a good Superman movie. Because I mean, think about how many iterations of Superman we have out there now. Yeah. There are people who their Superman is their Superman Red Sun. And it's like, that's not
all the time here.
You know what I mean? Right.
You know, it's funny. It wasn't until I considered that it could be an Elseworlds that I was easier on the Snyder set of films, because my hot take or controversial take is like, I don't know if they should be introducing Elseworld stuff if they can't get the normal stuff done right. Because I don't think the common person knows the difference between the Elseworld stuff and the normal stuff. Elseworlds allowed you to do all kinds of wacky stuff, and I feel like if you don't establish a foundation of who a character like Superman is, and you're only doing wacky other Elseworld takes of him, you'll never get back to like the meat of that matter. But what did you think about like the Kevin Smith portion of this? Him talking about, you know, writing and like his enthusiasm towards being able, like hearing that there was a Superman movie being made, wanting to get on that. What did his portion kind of invoke for you?
Well, I don't know if you look back on, because a script actually existed, or a tentative idea existed before Kevin Smith came in.
Yes.
And did you see where like Lois would give birth to a new Superman and then die? Did you read about that?
No, I didn't. I didn't check that out. That's interesting.
Because remember, Kevin Smith came in and changed it from Superman Reborn to Superman Lives.
Right.
So the Reborn stuff existed, whether it was actually written by someone or just a bunch of ideas from comic book panels that people saw. Mm-hmm. When I read up on that, I was like, oh my God, thank God Kevin Smith came in and gave it this structure. And you could tell he was, you know, many ideas as he was pulling from the comics, he had to also, hey man, I got to make sure the guy who's paying for all this is also satisfied. Yeah. So there's a good mixture of both. And for the most part, I was totally behind what he had for the most part, considering this is what he was tasked to do. I believe if you just said, hey man, we just want you to make a Superman script, I think he would have made something tighter overall. Something that would have eventually have led to this, because this is a man who understands structure very well, understands dialogue very well. I mean, like, because I say that because look what he made us care about two guys who work at a store, man. Yeah, these clerks, and has taken me happily through 3 movies where also all those characters interplay with one another across other movies. So this guy knows how to build a universe. You know, if he's building a universe from a bunch of degenerates from New Jersey, one love to Jersey, all love for the Jersey. Yeah. I believe he could have even done something better with this, but this is what he was tasked with.
Yes, so 100%.
I would have been totally fine had he just done it. And I love hearing how his interplay or interchange with Tim Burton, even to this very day. Yeah, it's really, really funny. Considering also the same thing happened to Burton, because Burton hates Schumacher.
Right. Yeah.
So it's talk about dogma, huh? Talk about dogma.
Yeah. And he would go on to give voices to characters like Green Arrow, right? When he writes for Green Arrow and Daredevil. I know he's about to do like a backup in Batman and Deadpool for Daredevil and Green Lantern or Green Arrow.
Yeah, he's written a little bit of Spider-Man and Batman as well.
Yeah, I remember he's gotten some flack for some of his Batman stuff, but he's
and the Spider-Man. He had Black Cat raped.
Oh dear, I know he had Poison Ivy get Batman high at one point or something like that. Like she used cannabis to fucking, but of him of all people, like obviously he would do that. So you want to talk about the giant spider?
I just think it's so funny. How
what do they know? The Thanagarian snare beast.
I love that name. As soon as they said that again, I was like, "Oh my God, this guy was building a bigger, even still trying to build a bigger universe." The idea that, of course, if there's Kryptonians, there's got to be Thanagarians. For those of you who don't understand, that's you know the hawk people, the bird people. You know, I was like, "Oh, that's so cool," because then that you could bring in Adam Strange and that world. Oh, this is so cool, it's so cool. Like. This is all stuff that, like James Gunn is trying to do.
I was about to say, could you imagine a film that introduces Superman and Thanagarians in the same film? Come on, bro.
It's possible, man. It's
100%.
possible.
But
that's one of
the. I was gonna say, but one of the rumored mandates was that that they use a giant spider in the third act. Eventually, this doesn't, because the film doesn't end up being made. They supposedly used the model for this giant spider in Wild Wild West. And that's how they were able to kind of get, he was able to kind of get his giant spider. But if you've seen The Flash and recognize this image behind me of Nicolas Cage in The Flash, he's actually fighting a giant spider and a horde of spiders in there as an homage to the movie that, never ended up happening. But even then, right, they're like, why a giant spider? And he's like, doesn't everybody know, like in the animal kingdom,
right.
the giant spider is the most
the deadliest creature. Like
what is going on?
I did kind of like that idea in that, it's better than just watching him fight, especially considering how bad it came across in Superman Quest for Peace when he fought the nuclear man.
Yes.
So I like the idea, like, a beast. And I then liked how it evolved into, it's Brainiac.
Yeah.
I dug that. I was like, okay, I can see how that could have worked. And it did, because again, how these ideas just bleed out in Batman Beyond, who becomes a spider?
It's Brainiac, isn't it? Or Freeze, Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze. Freeze becomes this little spider that connects to his body.
Yeah.
I'm like, you see, it can.
It's all there. It's all there, yeah.
So
I just wanted to talk a little bit about, because another thing that kept getting said, and this, when he was saying it, I can almost hear this in every single board meeting for any of this kind of stuff. Where's the action? Where's the action? We need more action. At one point, Kevin Smith is given the note that there's not enough fighting, and maybe Lex or Brainiac or whoever the villain is in this should go and beat up Superman's guards in the Fortress of Solitude. And Kevin Smith's like, but he doesn't have guards. It's the Fortress of Solitude. Why would Superman need guards? And so because that doesn't work through, they eventually end up kind of getting to a point of what's it called? Compromise, with this idea that what if instead of attacking, having a big fight scene at the Fortress of Solitude, Brainiac just goes to the fortress and sees polar bears and kills them. And then it's like, why polar bears? And it's like, don't you know polar bears are in the animal kingdom are the most fierce? And I'm like, what is going on here?
I would have loved how he just blatantly said, so we can get a Coke sponsorship. You know what I mean?
I'm surprised you just said that, because I was just about to ask, was this man just on Coke watching the Animal Planet and just being like, bro, the spider, the Danakarian snare beast is the third most deadliest spider.
But even with that, it made me upset with Kevin Smith's knowledge of Superman, because I'm like, he does use robot clones of himself whenever he's off world to make people believe.
And he has robots in the fortress.
These are later ideas that do exist in versions of Superman. So it's like, you could have said that, like, okay, he does have guards. He does have things that help him. And again, who's incorporating that into their new movie? I don't know. Right. I think so.
Yeah. I love like the enthusiasm of Smith just hitting this wall of Jon Peters, like asking questions like, why polar bears, or why this, or why that. I think a Danagarian snare beast, I think it's an interesting idea of like, and this may be something that they do in James Gunn's, but this idea of like, well, this is the Danagarian snare beast is just another alien. Maybe they're misunderstood. Maybe they're not happy that they just got dropped off on Earth and it's not trying to take over the planet. Someone just let it free, let it loose,
Yeah. Or it could have been Starro.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. But I guess they're hell bent on their freaking spider or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I think this is still kind of looking like Superman went under Kevin Smith, but eventually a year later, Tim Burton ends up signing on. They push Kevin Smith out. Warner Brothers taps Tim Burton, hot off of Batman and Edward Scissorhands, to direct and overhaul the film. Immediately, first thing he does is he rewrites the film. He casts Nicolas Cage as Superman, an unconventional but bold choice meant to emphasize Kal-El's alien nature. Before we move on, what did you think of that as a choice? Now this is something that's been rumored for years. We now have concept art. We have images of him in the suit. Do you think at that time, we're talking 1997, so let's go 98, 99, Con Air, all that kind of stuff there.
Hmm.
Do you think Nick Cage works as Superman?
No,
Interesting.
no. I remember, I was a heavy collector of Wizard, the guide to comics. Back in those days, really, the internet was AOL,
Yeah.
really, at the
Yeah.
time. There were very, very few websites.
You have to go to a chat room
I'm
on purpose, like,
right, right,
like
right.
get the keyword
You
and all
know,
that.
exactly. And I remember looking through Wizard and them showing the pictures of Nick Cage in this costume. And even before that, them talking about it. And I knew Nick Cage, even with his action background, and I like some of his funny movies. He won an Oscar and all that stuff. I was still like, when you coming off of George Reeves and Christopher Reeve as Superman, and then you see Nick Cage, it's hard to even picture him as Superman.
Yeah.
He's just not like those things. One of these things is not like the other. He doesn't fit the look. He just doesn't. So at that time, I was very much against it. But by the end of this documentary, I was sitting there going, "Man, I really wish I could have seen it.
At least
I really,
seen
really,
it, right?
right."
Yeah.
Because
It-
because Nick Cage is passionate about comic books. That's
yeah.
something I would learn much more later on, to the point where that's why he pushed for Ghost Rider to get made, and he's even thrown it out there that he's interested in doing other characters. And if it's one thing from Nick Cage, is the man, when he's into a role, he put his all into it.
Yeah.
So
And in case
seeing
those, sorry, I was gonna say in case people don't know, Nick Cage is not his real name. He's a Coppola, I want to say. I think
right,
he's
yes,
like
he
a
is.
nephew or an uncle or cousin of Francis
Right.
Ford.
Or Coppola, right?
And so he is Nick Cage because of Luke
Of
Cage.
Luke Cage, right?
And his son, I want to say, is named Cal.
Yes, he is.
So you
Right.
want to talk about like comic book love and lore? That's it right there. I think the misconception in casting Cage for this sits in that perception of alien. And I think that's the one thing they never really understood. Yes, Superman is an alien, but he's more so an alien because you tell him he's an alien. He doesn't feel like an alien. He was born like everybody else, and he was raised by human parents. He went to school, he had crushes, he tried out for teams, all that stuff,
Right.
and then found out that he had powers. But I think Nick Cage works for a fish out of water, just landed on Earth Superman.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I am a reporter. What does
Right.
a pencil do? And eating a pencil. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of era. Like, but born and raised on the planet, I don't really buy that. I don't think. They gave him like a level of anxiety and stuff in this.
Yeah,
Like I said,
I mean,
again,
part of that kind of worked for me, because it reminded me again, like Grant Morrison, his
yeah.
Superman, All-Star Superman, All-Star
Yes.
Superman,
Okay.
where you could see that he really hams it up when he's Clark Kent. I
Yeah.
gotta be all trippy and all this stuff. Even Christopher
Ooh.
Reeve, the way Christopher Reeve was Clark, he was all stumbly and stuttery. So you could see that. The only thing was the fact that, okay, Nick Cage is doing it because he does seem to have it. He's not acting it. He has that, unless he's in costume. When he's in
Yeah.
costume, then that's him. That's his true self, which reminds me of Kill Bill. Where
Yeah.
Bill gives that legendary monologue about who Superman really is. There's so many ways to just interpret this character, which
Yeah.
is what makes this character so much fun.
What do you think about the a wardrobe for Clark Kent? Like their version of what they thought like a dorky outfit was. It's just like kind of like
I
mismatch shirts and pants and stuff like that.
you mean the way people dress nowadays?
Kind of, sort of. When they first started doing it, I'm like, I don't think that's as wacky as you guys think it is. It's kind
But
of,
for that time, because again, fashion is the perceived fashion of the time,
yeah,
unless someone says otherwise.
yeah,
And at that time, oh yeah, this would have been dorky. I love the fact that they even said one of those sci-fi conventions,
yeah,
which nowadays everybody would just call Comic-Con
yeah.
of any kind. Like I think it's really funny when I told people, oh, I'm going to New York Comic-Con, everyone assumes it's like the one. I'm like, no, they're
Yeah,
all
it's like
over the place,
Spanish
man.
grandmothers and Frosted Flakes. Everything's Frosted Flakes.
Right.
They're all,
Nintendo. Mira, paga ese Nintendo, paga ese
Everything-
Nintendo. Mom, it's
everything's Nintendo.
PlayStation. It's
Yeah,
PlayStation.
whatever.
No,
And yeah, it's the same thing here with this. But also the classic, misunderstanding always of what a dork slash geek is. I mean, half of the time it was absolutely gorgeous people in glasses, you
Right.
know, and then they'd be like, "Look at that dork," and you'd watch the
Oh
movie
man.
like, "Why are
Yeah.
they so mean to those people?" It's
I'm
like
like,
some
I'm like, I'm like,
movie
I'm
star
like,
with glasses
if
on.
Michelle Pfeiffer, I would have been like, hey, how you doing?
Bro, Uma Thurman, right? Fumbling with her papers. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm just a meek little scientist. Like you're smoking hot,
Right.
and
Right.
you're like ridiculous. Um, but Burton will go on and assemble his own creative crew. Wesley Strick replaced Kevin Smith as screenwriter. Colin Atwood begins designing experimental suits. Concept art is created by Sylvain Desprez and others, shifting the look to a more alien, gothic, and weirdly elegant idea of Superman. Burton's vision: Superman as a misunderstood outsider, closer to Frankenstein than Captain America. Is that valid, or is that Burton putting his Burton steak sauce
I
on
feel like
Superman?
that's more of Burton putting his Burtonness on it,
Yeah,
which is what happens. I mean, you got Tim Burton doing this. He wanted to do this. This was
yeah,
that's what Tim Burton does. I mean, look, you watch the original Willy Wonka and the Charlie Chocolate Factory, and then you watch his Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You're like,
bit
not
different.
only is this just a different movie, some weird director made this. Yeah, yeah, it's about right.
Yeah, I would also say that this same thing happened with those Batman films. I mean, by returns, they're literally circus acts. Like like
Right.
he always feels like Guillermo del Toro. Like they interviewed Guillermo del Toro, and he's very sympathetic to the plight of the monster. When
Right.
you ask Guillermo del Toro, almost all his movies have like a monster or a creature. Like
Right.
he was Shape of Water, right? Like he won an Oscar for that, and it's like diving into the idea of something unhuman and what can humanity exist in something that seemingly is unhuman, and that's how you get the versions of Penguin that you get,
Yeah.
spitting up black goo and all that kind of stuff because he's thinking about it that dark. But they scanning through a lot of this concept art. Was there anything that like caught your mind? Anything that caught your
Oh, I
like
mean,
snagged you for this?
tons. I mean, I really loved when they brought in, I forget which artist there was so many people that he was quickly interviewing, but there's one artist who was just like, yeah, this guy's locked behind a door and he's just spewing out drawings of different aliens and monsters that would be locked away on Brainiac's ship at one point. I was like, oh, that's a lot of cool stuff that reminds me of Quado from Total Recall, or that thing reminds me of a Parasite when he's really juiced up. Lots of cool concepts
Yeah,
that this movie would have just laid out. When they mentioned Mobius, Mobius is a fantastic artist. God rest his soul. For those of you who are hyped for the Fantastic Four movie and don't know, look for his Silver Surfer stuff that he did with Stan Lee.
really good.
That art is unbelievable. And I guarantee you, in some way, shape, or form, every Fantastic Four movie has tapped into that. And I really hope to see some of that in the new one a lot. I want to see more of that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I like the idea. At one point, they were talking about maybe like Krypton exploding and each like city being trapped in its own little bottle on Brainiac's ship.
Mhm.
They talked a lot about that. I like the whole idea about Brainiac in general. I like Tim Burton's weird spindly drawings. I like because you could tell
Right.
it's him. This is not
Right.
like we
Hmm.
see so much concept art right now that just is so dead because it's so artificial and it's so
Right.
like it's so just a plug and play drop, drag and drop kind of stuff. And you have Burton with these like hollowed out eyes and
Hmm.
these spindly little arms, and like we were talking about before, the Brainiac with that spider
Right.
really 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 worked. Because what does he need? What does he need a body for? All the time his body looks like it's artificial anyway, something he would have
Right.
built or improved or been improving upon. So I think that definitely worked there.
I was fascinated with the hubris and the humility, the way he just looked at Kevin Smith and was like, "Yeah, your stuff is dumb." But then at the same time, he goes, "Yeah, my art is kind of dumb. You need someone to come in and better retool it."
Yeah.
Like, wow, the amount of arrogance followed by humility was. I was like, "Wow, this guy's really interesting." I mean, look at his house. Look at his
Do,
house behind me, right?
do you think they could have worked as a creative team, or are
I
they
think
too
so.
different?
I think
Yeah.
so, and I think that's one of the biggest problems with this movie is the fact, because even when they brought in Wesley Strick and then Dan Gilroy, you know, from what I felt, none of them were complimentary of each other. They each felt like, oh well, I'm in here now because I'm gonna make it better.
Yeah.
It's like, work together, y'all.
And somebody, please, we gotta make this damn movie.
Because to me, that's the key component to what made everything else since work, is when people realized, even something as recent as Sin City, when two directors realized, yo, we got to bring in Frank Miller, and we're not going to bring him in to be like, hey man, we like your ideas, we're going to retool it, can you sign this? It was like, no, we're bringing you in. And the same thing I feel, even though you constantly hear those reports that the creators don't get their just deserve the money they deserve for their ideas, they're still bringing them in. They're bringing in David Aja. They're bringing in Brian Michael Bendis. I mean, one of the Jason Aaron shared out about how the DC writers were all brought to the production of Superman.
Yeah.
And I saw all these writers, Jerry Ordway maybe not Jerry Ordway, but Jason Aaron, Scott Snyder, and just a slew of other creative people who I was like, oh, he's there. Like, wow, like, okay, so James Gunn, I guarantee you at some point contacted these people, and now he's bringing them in to be like, this is on point, right?
Yeah.
You gotta appreciate that.
This took place a little bit before the timeline that we're at, but what about the line where initially Kevin Smith is like offering people that can kind of come in and write or whatever, and it's like, well, those are comic book guys.
Right.
Like, are you kidding? Like,
yeah, the guy again, because it's just like you said earlier, the fact that they went from the character's idea to the death of Superman. They just said, oh, the guys who wrote and drew and inked and edited 500 issues. What do they know? Yeah. We're Hollywood. They're comic books.
Yeah, it's just another example, because like a lot of how the reason why like some of the DC stuff was taking off on television was because of people like Jeff Johns, who had a affinity for the comics, wrote and redesigned and re-educated an entire fan base on certain members of the DC universe, and then really I want to say like even Stargirl was like a character that meant so much to him that he made sure he put his hands on that project.
Stars on Stripes.
And they get a full JLA, they get a full Injustice Society. Like he cared that much. He wanted to flesh out all those characters. Some of them are lesser known. And you don't get that incentive if you don't care about this stuff. Similarly, as we were talking about the James Gunn of it all, like he knows that Superman is best with a built world, a world around him, and the more like DC has been, it's almost embarrassing, to be honest, how little of the DC universe we have seen in cinema. It's such a small corner. Such a small corner, to the point that I'm rewatching Doom Patrol now, because I'm gonna bite the bullet and see that final season. That first season I absolutely love, and amazing stuff. But it's like animal, vegetable, minimal, man, isn't that? And you go, well, yeah. I'm looking, and I'm not watching it alone, so I look to my right and I'm like, all this stuff is comic stuff. All of this. Because there's no point in making up ridiculous stuff. No. Ridiculous stuff exists in the comics.
Condiment King, my man.
Yeah.
Kite Man.
You just pull that out. You don't have to make up something silly. That's why I was like, think about this studio. This is the same studio that's like, the Superman movies are doing well. You know what they need? Richard Pryor is what they need for a Superman movie. That would be akin of being like, you know what, Superman, this James Gunn Superman thing needs Kevin Hart. We need Kevin Hart as Jimmy Olsen this entire time, kind of bugging Superman and getting all up in his business and all that kind of stuff.
Even at one point when they were talking about Jimmy Olsen for this, they wanted Chris Rock.
Yeah.
Which I love Chris Rock, but I would have hated seeing him as Jimmy Olsen, and it has nothing to do with the color of his skin.
If he was Jimmy Olsen, he would be doing the stuff that I criticized Rob Snyder for doing in Judge Dredd. That's what it would have been. His character in this would have been like him tripping and him like, that just happened.
I can imagine the jokes he would have had with Perry White's just name. Oh, you Perry White because you white.
Yeah, basically. Don't you see I'm working for a white man? That's what he would have said.
I don't mean the color of your skin. I mean your last name. Yeah. We get it.
But Tim always was swinging for the fences with these minority castings because he wanted Marlon Wayans for Robin. in
Yep.
Batman in his Batman Forever, and he's the one who casted Billy D. Williams as Harvey Dent.
Which I would have
So
been totally fine with. I would have been totally fine with that.
so he's always kind of had it out there. What do you think of Lexiac? The
I love that.
the fused villain of Lex Luthor and Brainiac sharing one body, two heads. Um, I think it's comic books, man. I think that is. It doesn't have to
It's
be long
not only
lasting.
comic books. It's not only comic books, but they did it in the Justice League animated cartoon.
Oh, they did. I didn't. I haven't seen that episode.
What? That's one of like
No,
the
really? Hey, man.
they do it. Which
They're
that's why
fused.
yeah, Brainiac. It takes place because this is when they really started to merge the Superman animated cartoon with the Justice League animated cartoon, where
Hmm.
Superman had destroyed Brainiac. Lex Luthor, gathers up the technology, it rebuilds Brainiac. Brainiac's like, it'd be great if I just fused myself with you. And at one point, people are starting to realize, Lex Luthor's kind of acting a little funny. It's almost as if he's possessed or something. And
Right.
lo and behold, inside of him is Brainiac. And
That's
then he
interesting.
becomes like super Brainiac through Lex, and they have to fight him. And he almost looks like a tentacle monster.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
So and it's WB owned. So I can imagine like the writers of like I wouldn't be surprised if it was Dwayne McDuffie, a freaking RIP, one of my favorite freaking writers of all time. He's probably got the notes on this somehow, some way. It was like, I'm going to incorporate this and show you guys, sons of bitches, how this could have worked. How did it work? Because he told it over the course of like 15 episodes.
Yeah. And I want to say more and more as his depictions go on, Brainiac is shown to have like these tentacles, these more spindly kind of parts of his body,
Mhm.
parts of his ship. What do you think about the whole like skull ship design stuff?
Loved it. Loved it. If
I thought
if
that was really
Thanos
cool
can
too.
if Thanos can have a giant plus sign T number Roman numeral one as a ship, I mean, and all these other characters can have these crazy ships. Why not? Why not? I that was one of the few things that I really liked when Jon Peters was like, I'm pushing for a skull ship. And I'm like, I can see how that's annoying, but then I like the fact that he had the idea, but still was even had showed some humility to just put it in the hands of the creature designers. And I
Yeah.
love the fact that they gave the props to like Geiger and I think even Mobius was mentioned again with this because the way they just put that thing together to make it work,
Yeah.
to stat with seeing that on screen would have been so ominous and just terrifying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this ain't your daddy Superman. Like, oh, we got a skull ship full of aliens raining down that's helmed by this robot that's really a spider.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, it definitely had a bit of a sci-fi bent, and you have these moments where they show, like in the concept art, that like the huge eyes would be just big windows to, for everyone, and or you have all these little stations that are being manned by Brainiac's, his entourage and stuff like that, and how ominous, like you said, a giant skull is, the symbol of death,
Yeah, right.
breaking through our hemisphere to seek whatever it's looking for on Earth.
Yeah.
I thought all of that was really interesting. But yeah, the idea, we've seen Lex team up and do some ridiculous stuff. I'm even thinking of that recent Apex Lex stuff with the Martian stuff that he was doing. Like he
Hmm.
will do some crazy stuff just to get at Superman in
That's
this.
it.
Um, but there's still like all that stuff seemed like it works, but I don't know how that works with the death of Superman again. This all feels like an
No.
introduction to a
Hmm.
character, and you're trying to also kill him to then garner sympathy to have him want him back, and that all feels like it clashes.
Yeah, because to me, the Brainiac aspect to me, that's a whole movie. He
Yeah.
escapes from the planet. Brainiac is part of the reason the planet was destroyed, which again was kind of brought up in the Superman animated series.
Hmm.
And then Brainiac, when he eventually finds him, he cons Superman initially into, oh yeah, I'm here to preserve cultures, and I'm here to bring you your culture. Oh, but in order to bring you your culture, I have to imprison you with these crazy creatures that I've kidnapped from all across the cosmos. And I was like, oh man, this is a Superman cartoon. So it just this that was just could have been one movie that then it could have ended with, oh, one of the creatures escaped. What creature
Yeah.
was it? Or it was a doomsday thing or something. You know what I mean? Or because because that's how I remember the comic book starting, where Doomsday was just in a box tied
What,
up. You didn't even
what they
see
word
him.
they use? Menagerie, right? Is the word that they use for
A
that?
menagerie, yes,
This idea, and that
yeah,
would make like that, like you just said, that is Power Rangers, right? Like every week he just fights a different monster that's let out of the menagerie, something
right,
else that
right,
Brainiac thinks might be the thing to take him down, or
right,
whatever. Until he's like, you know what, I'm gonna let this little girl from Candor whoop his ass or some shit like that,
right,
for her
yeah,
freedom or
yeah,
some shit,
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's all there because it's all in the books.
And to me, the only way I'm seeing it work is if it was a 3 hour movie, which in
Yes.
1998, telling the people to sit through a 3 hour movie,
We just saw Judge Dredd, and that was like 90 minutes. It was like
right,
95 minutes or something like
right,
that. Even I want to say The Incredible Hulk is about like 95 minutes, maybe 100
hmm
minutes all up.
right,
Um, Now I want to kind of talk about one of my favorite parts of this documentary, and it's the going into and just like the immense passion of creating these test suits, these suits for Superman.
hmm
What did you think about the various directions they went in to kind of give Superman not only a unique suit, but seemingly one that was alive? One that is, one of the early concepts was that it would be a bit of a Kryptonian AI named K that would be
right.
trying to protect him at all times and trying to, heal him at all times, and even getting to the sort of black and silver regeneration suit of, the reason why there's a black suit, people, it's not a fashion choice. My man was using that to come back from death.
Right.
So, what did you think, given how much that they change up, because a lot of this stuff is brand new that they're making up, these concepts and
hmm
stuff like that. Do you think there was room at the time for these changes? And what did you think visually, seeing how they were able to intricately tie in clear panels with
hmm
LED lighting and silver iridescent sort of symbols, like cool car stuff, like. But what do you think of the designs of these suits in this?
The process that they went through to make these suits, I had to give them so much props, especially at a time when you didn't CGI was really barely used.
Yeah,
So they had to. They were like, "Oh, to make this work, we got to design this. Oh, that doesn't work, so let's do this. Oh, that doesn't work, we have to do this." So seeing them, they were described as like mad scientists. The way they had to design these things, these to get the LEDs and the how do you the small coax fiber optic cables, these
yeah,
tiny
yeah,
little
yeah.
fiber optics inside the plastics, and then the carapace like shells that they had to eventually stick into it that were perfectly molded to each individual muscle.
Hmm.
Like the creativity behind that was amazing, and I can only imagine how much money was spent on this movie to never come out.
Yeah,
So I just seeing the work that went into this, that I can't even think of what they could have took this and said, okay, look, well, let's use it in this movie, because everything afterwards I feel like was CGI. It
yeah.
definitely wasn't used in Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern. I'll tell you that right now.
No.
So it felt very sad, and especially again because this made me hate myself when I saw those pictures of Nick Cage
Yeah.
in that awful looking mid snap picture that's obviously not HD. I remember seeing that in magazines, being like, "Oh hell no! Don't give
Yeah.
me this!
It looks
Don't
like
give
a
me this!"
cosplay.
Right, right. It looks like Superman. I mean, it looks like Nick Cage got invited to the
A
Playboy
swingers
Mansion for
party.
a weekend,
Yeah. Same thing. Yeah.
and it's just awful. It's
That's funny.
absolutely awful. But then to see the final product, I was like, oh, and the fact that Brian freaking Singer was using that picture on the set of Superman Rebirth, what Superman Returns, Superman Returns,
Yeah.
as look, this is what you almost made. Man, I think that I think a bad Burton movie would have been better than Returns, because that movie was dog shit.
Yeah. I think it
I
it
have
it was too much back to formula. It was
back to formula.
yeah, it was cornflakes you add sugar to. It's
Mhm.
like, yeah, I
Too
guess it
much
could work,
sugar.
but like this is not, no, this
But
we've
again,
done
I
things
guarantee you one of
before.
the reasons that movie got pushed was because this was too crazy to them. They said, no, no, you know what works? Christopher Reeve. But
Yeah.
we can't get Christopher Reeve because this Brandon Routh guy. Get him. He can't talk. He's not
Yeah.
allowed to speak because he can't act. which
Yeah.
later on we find out, yes, he can.
Yeah, definitely. And it was just safe in this. Like one of the things you were talking about, I love how they almost replicated muscle fibers with with those wires, with like
Hmm.
how they went down and around. And like you said, it would be like something like, let's say, I don't know, even if I lowballed it and said like 45 connections, it still connect wire one to terminal one to battery one, connect wire two to terminal two to battery two, and okay, we made it, but now I can't move. How do we enable mobility? Okay, I
Right.
made it and it can move, but now the panels are not clear enough to see
Right.
the light. How can we do that?
Yeah.
I thought it was extremely endearing watching them tackle this seemingly impossible challenge and finding ways around it. They seemed in the behind the scenes footage, they seemed so excited by making this a possibility, by making this real. And then as we were talking about the idea that, I don't know, 30-ish years later, the absolute version of Superman will get a AI suit that will heal him, talk to him, and make sure that he's okay. Like I did never connected the two until I rewatched this
Right.
for this,
Hmm.
and I was like I can't because I'm listening to them and I'm going, that's a kind of cool like oh yeah.
Hmm.
At one point they're like, John Schnepp asks, I want to say Burton about it, about in one of the designs, or maybe it was one of the actual concept artists, but he's like, oh, so you put glyphs all around the suit, little symbols around the suit, like why? And they're like, oh, because you just wanted to make it more alien, and that's something they did with Man of Steel. Every part
Right.
of that suit
Hmm.
is a little
Suit.
symbol, a little,
Hmm.
all the Kryptonian glyphs all over it. So it's like this has
Uh,
became like a
pa-
treasure trove of good ideas, but they threw them all in the garbage. So people are dumpster diving for good ideas to help
yeah.
make other projects or other movies and stuff. And it's just bonkers that they had it all in their hands here.
Yeah. I remember seeing that and being like, oh shit, the Snyder fans are gonna be like, you see?
And you want to talk about like any notes or any kind of collaboration or inspiration that they wanted to have with Geiger, they totally took that from Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Like all of
Hmm.
that Kryptonian tech, the spaceships, all that stuff screams H.R. Geiger.
Right.
And so like they obviously had a direction that they went on here. This is like, if you look at this as a vehicle, this is like drunk driving, right? This is like the most overcorrection ever, where you're like
Uh-huh.
driving off a cliff with this crazy Burton idea, and then you just turn the wheel completely. Now you're driving backwards, doing Superman Returns, right? Going back to the 70s, and then you make Man of Steel, which is the exact opposite of Superman Returns in almost every way. We almost overcorrected in that sense. So it's just like, I don't think Superman is this hard, and I've been led to believe he is by incompetent studios and incompetent producers and writers who are always the ones championing the same thing of like, well, he beats everybody, and he's
Right.
boring, and how do you make him challenging? And it's like that's not the case. He literally can save a cat from the tree, and you can make the story compelling because it's
Yeah.
about him. It's not about the
Right.
cat. It's not about the
Right.
fight. It's not about any of those things. When they were mentioning a lot of the concepts in this, and then they would have the Jon Peters moment of like, yeah, but where are the fight scenes? I'm never thinking that. I'm almost never thinking that. I'm like kind of in it. I'm in it for the story, But
Superman Part One is still a great movie.
yeah,
What did he fight in that movie?
I don't
An
remember.
an earthquake, man. He
Yeah,
fought an earthquake,
yeah. And he couldn't
and
punch
then
it, so he went around and he went backwards in time.
that's it. And he redirected a rocket. And guess what else he did in that? He saved the cat.
He did save a cat. Gotta save a cat, man. It's like right there. Um, in 1998, Gilroy ends up getting on here and polishing the script. As concerns rise about Strick's slow-paced, moody draft, Warner Brothers brings in Dan Gilroy, the future writer of Nightcrawler, to give it more structure and cinematic clarity. His version keeps the themes of alienation and resurrection, but injects more tension and emotional payoff. Gilroy leans into Kal-El's eternal conflict, modernizing him as a being who must choose between his alien heritage and human responsibility. That sounds like Man of Steel. And this version is most closely resembling what could have made it to screen. There's also elements like a subplot about Lois Lane being pregnant with Superman's child that you were talking about, this whole
Mhm.
reborn nature and stuff, and a focus on Kal-El questioning his identity and role on Earth. Again, sounds more like Super Man of Steel stuff
Steel. Mm-hmm.
there. Um, I don't. It feels like people are placing their insecurities with the character on the character
Right.
and forcing it to almost
Mm-hmm.
defend itself in
Right.
cinema to the fans. And that's kind of shitty, in my opinion. The character is good. It doesn't have to come out and explain why it needs to exist
Mm-hmm.
or why it should exist. And I feel like we've done that like 2 or 3 times now, where we are expecting Superman to almost apologize for existing, while every news report in Metropolis is like, the Superman problem. Do we need a Man of Steel? You know, it's like, come on, bro. He just saved your kid.
As half the city is being blown to pieces. Like, do we need
Yeah.
this guy? Lex Luthor will save the day. No, he won't.
That's the reason why his death didn't work in those movies, because no one gave a
Right.
damn about him. And then when he died, there's parades in the street and there's memorials to him. Someone spray painted false god on
All right.
on this thing. They tagged it, and now he's dead. Oh, everyone's feeling really really
Mm.
sad about this. Again, it's just such a creatively bankrupt idea to be doing this at this time. And not to mention, 97 is when Gilroy comes into the script. This is the same year as Batman and Robin, and also the same year as Steel and Spawn.
And many other WB flops.
Yes, yes. So they are not doing well at this time, and we're getting close to the Marvel bankruptcy. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
like comic books, the bubbles popped.
Mm-hmm.
The actual bubble of comic books is pop images, selling 1 million #1s over on their side. The comic book bubble has popped. So
But
interest is kind of, go ahead.
I was saying, but we also around that time got Blade.
Yes, yes. Because of the thing, because they had to sell his ass off because they needed to make money because they were going
Right.
bankrupt. So yeah, this is a very uncertain time for superhero film, but animation is like killing it.
Yeah.
At this time in this decade, we had an animated Spider-Man cartoon, animated Superman cartoon, animated Batman cartoon, animated Justice League cartoon. We got Fantastic Four, we got Silver Surfer. We had like
Iron
all
Man.
Iron Man. Yeah, we had all these characters. Throwing things at the wall to see if it sticks. The success of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the '80s, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
make things that have toys and all that other kind of stuff. But again, like, so what did I see the other day? I think someone was talking about the new Pixar movie, and they were like, "Yeah, it did bad. Don't they know that we're tired of movies for kids?" And I'm like, "What? That's what
We're
Pixar
tired.
does."
Not just that, but we're tired of just bad movies.
Yeah,
Or
that's 100%. Yeah, but this idea of like we're tired of movies for kids. It's like maybe you're done with Pixar. That's fine too, right?
Right.
Like
Mhm.
you have to get off the bus eventually. I'm assuming. Like I am done with like Disney, not because I hate them, but because my childhood films have been fulfilled. I've seen my childhood
Right.
films.
Right.
Everything that comes out now is going to fail in comparison to my nostalgic childhood memories of
Mhm.
my movies that probably someone would have looked at that's older than me and been like, these are all trash. The ones that they made before, Jungle Book and all that kind of stuff. But that's the, real heart of Disney and stuff like. So it's all perspective in this, and it's just so crazy that their perspective on this was like, Superman doesn't work, so we have to pile and pile a bunch of other concepts and a bunch of other, like almost everybody in this felt a little bit more exciting. That's why I like that they were doing different things with Superman in this, because if not, then the entire world, it's like a controversial opinion. I feel like the world and even the villains are more interesting than Batman in the first 2 Burton films. And I
Yeah.
feel like the
No,
films
mhm.
almost are centered on the villains, and then we dip in to check on Batman sometimes.
Well, I've always felt that way in general. A hero to me is only as interesting as his villains,
Yeah,
because otherwise he's just flying around or doing good. Why? He's not needed. But a villain brings about a problem, and then the hero elevates the story by defeating the villain. So
yeah.
I like that idea in Burton. Yeah. If there's no Joker, Batman's running around beating guys up on rooftops.
Do you want to see a more eclectic Superman's rogue gallery in the film? 'Cause I think right now
Yes.
we've just kind of really ever gotten Lex, right? We have
Like, I'll be
Doomsday
honest. Yes,
stuff.
I'll be honest with you. In general, I was not happy when they did Lex again. I was hoping that, okay, we have Lex, but we're also going to have Parasite. We're going to have Toyman. We're gonna have, even Maxima show up.
Yeah.
Something different.
You know what
Because
I
it's
want?
like, oh,
I want Mongol.
Mongol.
I want Mongol. I feel like Mongol would be badass, an
War
era
World and
where
and the politics behind that, yes, that would
yeah.
be brilliant nowadays. Yeah, of course.
And
All the
if you've seen my post on CBC, which everyone should be following, facebook.com/ComicBookClique, I said if we're gonna go the wacky route, I want Martin Short as Mr. Mixapitalik.
Yes, I did see that, and I thought that was
Yeah,
brilliant. I'm like,
I was
oh
like,
hell yeah,
you get that?
hell
Like
yeah.
that is there's nothing more comics than this little fifth dimensional, all powerful being just fucking with Superman. He just wants to fuck with Superman. That's all he cares about.
Basically tell him and what was the name of that wacky ass character he played back in the day with the fin
Oh,
for the
I
hair?
remember. With
You know
the
what I'm
names.
saying?
With the
Be
names.
yes, like
Yeah,
be that character, but Mr. Mixes
yeah,
do it. And I
yeah.
can have you seen Only Murders in the Building?
I've heard great things, but he's always been one of those people like Eddie Murphy that I find like effortlessly funny. Like it just comes out of them. And when I
Yes.
heard that he came back and was doing that, I had no doubt that he was firing on all cylinders because whenever he puts his mind to something, he's dynamite in it.
Yeah, exactly. He carried. Watch at least the first season. Highly recommend.
I'll check it out.
After that, but
little wonky there.
yeah.
So we eventually get to a point in early 1998, as pre-production cost mounts, estimated over $190 million in pre-production. A camera has not even been turned on yet.
In 1998.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that cost real quick, and I'm going to see if I can get like an extrapolator to find out.
Just to give you an idea, I mean, there are some modern movies that haven't cost that much. I think Sinners was made for less money than that. So the fact that they were putting almost $200 million into a movie that, like you said, was not even filmed yet, with the exception of pre-production film of Nick Cage trying on costumes and Tim Burton talking and people designing suits, $200 million. That's one of the reasons why WB was bleeding. They were just like, we need something. You got to do something. We need to make these other movies. So eventually, once they reallocated the budget to more stinkers, including Wild Wild West, they can only look back on Superman and think, man, this is just a waste. But then Superman ended up being their savior because they put the money into Superman Returns, which, as much as I didn't like the movie, it actually did fairly well.
Yeah. So for inflation, $190 million in 1998 is roughly $375 million today. So spending $375 million on a film that's never going to come out. I mean, this is Batgirl. This is Wiley, what is it? Wiley versus Acme or whatever that they were talking about from before.
Right.
What are we doing? What is anyone doing? Is this like a Ponzi scheme? Are they is this like some weird embezzlement thing where they just, how do you put all this money and just tank it? Eventually, obviously, one of the reasons that this also got the plug pulled is because it got the plug pulled roughly around the bad reviews that surrounded Batman and Robin.
Right.
So
which
now
where Burton is like, he starts cursing Schumacher. He's like, you ruined my movies. You ruined my Superman without even giving me a chance to get it out there.
Yeah.
And even Schumacher, God rest his soul, also, even he apologized. He's like, I'm sorry. I was just doing what I was told to do.
Yeah. 100%. And Batman and Robin ruins the production of Superman. But what's interesting about that is that Batman and Robin was a movie that was supposed to be the studio's course correcting. So if anything, this was a major red flag of we don't know we have to stop everything because obviously we don't know what we're doing. We just made a bunch of mandates to change this film, took it out of the director's hands and said we want this, that, and that, rubber butts and all that kind of stuff. And now it's not making the money that we think it's supposed to be making. So what the hell are we doing with Superman? If we thought we knew what we were doing with Batman and messed it up, then we obviously don't know what we're doing with Superman. We just need to pull every plug, that exists. So 3 weeks before cameras were set to roll, 21 days, the production is shelved. The project entirely is shelved. Crazy. Burton is devastated. He's burned his final bridge with Warner Bros. He is over that whole thing. He ends up going hanging out with Disney for a bit, and helping them out with some of those films. He spent a year designing and conceptualizing, and when you're in those creative modes, like everyone who was a part of this believed it was going to happen. Why wouldn't you?
Right.
Money's coming in to get it done. Mandates are
Mm-hmm.
coming in to get it done. What did you think about the whole Jon Peters bringing his kids to the
Oh my God.
storyboarding?
I can totally imagine part. I understood when he explained it because kids are honest.
Yes.
And for me, a lot of times when I review stuff, whether it's a show or even this documentary, I try to not see it by myself.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something I already seen, because I like getting my son's opinion. Like a Judge Dredd, he watched Judge Dredd with me, I was like, Jose, I know my nostalgia goggles are gonna just blurry my vision. So seeing it with him was like, okay, that helps. And then I saw this with a buddy of mine, and he was cracking jokes on the whole situation, and like, because he's not a comic person like we are, but he understands some of it. So he's sitting there commenting like, what are they talking about? Who would make this idea? Who would think this is good? And I'm like, okay, I like that. So then seeing them, the way they talk about the idea of bringing in kids, I like that. I'm like, that's brilliant. But the way he does it, like, dude, give these people the heads up.
Yeah.
And don't just disregard them, because he's not even introducing them to these people, which makes me again show how little appreciation the Hollywood people have for the people behind all this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the guy who drew this, but because I funded it, it's my idea. The fuck out of here.
There was a lot of like him having to use like Hollywood speak to cover up what it is seemingly just on paper shitty behavior.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that was hitting people.
Yeah, he put a guy in a headlock. He's hitting people. I'm just like, what? And honestly,
and then they ask him, he's like, well, I'm a fighter. And, like,
oh, yeah,
that's what you do. And I'm like, come on, bro. Like, I know real badasses. And badass doesn't talk like the way you're talking.
No,
no. It sounds like you signed up for a judo class somewhere, a Taibo in the 90s.
Honestly, it sounds like Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal, when he talks about, you do this. And it was highly annoying. He was
definitely the most entertaining part of this, because again, how ridiculous it was. It also just reminded me of the idea where they're like, with Kevin Smith, where they're like, yeah, you sent over the script, so you'll just be able to come over Monday, right? And he's like, for what? I sent over the script.
Are you going to read it to me?
You have to read it to him. And he lays on the couch and visualizes the movie on his ceiling.
And that to me just rings of, oh, you are illiterate. That's what's going on here.
And that could totally be it. But another thing is, it's like, it's so crazy to have these people who are brimming with passion almost have to walk through a doggy door to get in to a producer's, get in, become the eye, the eye of a producer, and then get their permission to make art. Now more than ever. Before it was mostly like you would have the auteur directors, and definitely foreign films were seemingly made for more art purposes than commercial. But America, it's always been commercial. These films need to make money. That's their primary goal. If they can do other stuff, now we're in a period right now where you can have very artistic films made by very small town production companies, and people will, passionate, film fans, film buffs, will go above and beyond to go check it out and make it the money that it deserves. But in the 90s, no, maybe you could rent it from your shady video shop that was on your block, in the back room or something like that. But no, like it was about the blockbuster. And not only that, it was about the leading man, right? We were talking about Stallone last week with this. And so they were putting a lot on Nick Cage to get this off the ground. And like I said, with Face Off and Con Air and stuff like that, he definitely wasn't a stranger. But Warner Brothers, more than anyone else that I've ever seen, would just hand these roles to A-list actors. I mean, like Ben Affleck was a get when they got him for Batman. You understand? Like he was doing the Argo stuff and directing, and the rumor has it that he was supposed to direct his own Batman movie before all that went into production bullshit. But they've always had the bread to get who they want. Right. But then nothing past that. No direction, no. They just go, well, if they're on the cover, they're on the poster, like that should be enough. This actor. Jeremy, we're gonna bring in Jeremy Irons for Alfred. Oh, what the hell? It's fucking huge. It's kind of fucking big. Right. Andy Serkis for Alfred. Then why? We screw it. Whatever. He's the hot guy right now. All of that sort of foresight, of picking these A-list actors, but none of the like passion behind what they're actually here to adapt. And that's why some of the Marvel movies with unknowns have done better than DC movies with A-list actors because it's about the story. It's not about the people in it. It's never been.
Right.
Nick Cage's contract ends up expiring. Most of the creatives are reassigned. The only legacy is the concept art, the test footage, and the deep what if energy that would fuel fandoms for decades, eventually leading to, like I said, the shot behind me, where they include Nick Cage as Superman in this. In a surreal twist, a year after the shutdown of this film, Peters reuses his spider finale idea for Wild Wild West, where Will Smith fights a giant mechanical spider in the third act. The punchline to Kevin Smith's Hollywood story becomes real. And it just goes to show, like, I don't know what I would have done if all my hard work would have went to this and it never got made. Like, you hear about the soul crushing nature of the people who did the first Fantastic Four film, where they begging the studio for a copy and begging to do their own promotion. Like,
they're just throwing it on fire. What film?
This was time in somebody's life. Superman is such a humongous deal. You got to think about, like, telling your wife you got the Superman job to do the suit, right? Or to do the costuming, or to write the script, and things
the draw. That was a lot of the artists. They were using Mobius art. They were using Geiger inspiration. Sylvain Deprez. You can hear the frustration of the amount of creative stuff he was doing, while at the same time having people who don't. No, like when he talked about how when Jon Peters would come in and blatantly almost choose the things he didn't like.
Yeah.
And you could tell that's totally an arrogant thing to do, to be like, I can't pick the thing he likes, because then if I do, then he's going to get the credit. So I'm going to pick the thing he doesn't pick out, because then I think it's cool. Therefore, it's my idea. No, it's not.
And when you have to think in 5D chess like that every day, like every day, like, that's got to be bonkers. But the children's story reminds me of the story you hear about in, like, the prequels, of George Lucas, like, coming in with, like, a marker and being like, no, no, like, going to storyboard and just writing no, and then, like, no elaboration, just walking off, kind of stuff. I don't think anyone would have minded external feedback for their creations. I don't think any creative really minds that. But I've also been at jobs where the boss will come and bring people, friends or family, just to kind of seem like a big shot. Just to kind of seem like, I kind of run all this, go over there. Go check out that concept art. What are they going to do to you? I run this. You know what I'm saying? Tell them it's trash. That 30-year artist veteran that's working painstakingly hard on these 10 different designs of a suit. Go over there and tell them it's garbage. Or something like that. So, like, while I do admit that external feedback is welcome, this didn't feel like he was doing something altruistic. This felt like, damn wife gave me the kids this weekend, I guess I'm just gonna send them to the Superman Live set to do that. But yeah, man, I like that things from this got to see the light of day. And I wouldn't be surprised at how much of this we're gonna end up seeing in Superman in a couple weeks. That's also very interesting.
I mean, just the Superman having guards. I was like, wow, okay. They're man, if only there were polar bears, it'd be so much better.
Fucking polar bears, man.
A bunch of polar bears carrying
slaughtering polar. Yeah, there you go. Right. I think it would have just been the penguins from Batman Returns.
That's right.
The penguin pallbearer funeral.
That's it. One of them pops a Coke. Here, Cal. Not only do you need your son, you need a Coke. Here you go.
Yeah, right. The WB would have took all of that bread. They didn't give a damn about it. I seen the back credit card. It's a thing. So anything else you want to say about? I know this is a bit of a short one. Next week we're covering 4 issues. Another short one because there's about to be a lot of homework being done behind the scenes for ComicBookClique with a lot of big stuff here coming up. But yeah, what are your final thoughts on the death of Superman Lives? What happened? What do you think about just the creation of this documentary in general?
Yeah, I mean, Jon Schnepp, another one, R.I.P., right? Yeah. Thank you for getting this done. Any family members who are hearing this, or anybody who was friends with him, even Chris Stuckman. Chris Stuckman reviewed this passionately, and he talked very well of Jon Schnepp. So and me, I until you said it, I didn't know he died. I didn't think to look at that this guy is not with us anymore. And to me, you could tell he has such a passion for comic books. I would have loved to talk to him because he's another DC guy. There's so much DC stuff that I don't know.
Yeah.
Like this. So I would say give this a look, and also just learn from this in that don't dismiss an idea that you don't agree with, because it could be good, could be great. And I really wish I wish we had a Rick Gunn to travel to the universe where this movie got made so we could see it.
100%. My takeaways from this movie you can put in, or this documentary you can put in a glass case. And anytime you really want to understand why movies aren't, hitting or being made as they should, this is a prime example of profit versus passion. And I think it's not more evident than just listening to people. You can just listen to people in this and you can tell where their head's at. You can tell what they're focused on. You can tell what's important to them. And I think it's just such a glaring example about how sometimes creatives and studios can be on two completely different pages when it comes to this kind of stuff. And it almost makes the most sense that James Gunn is both the head of the studio and the director, right? Because if not, then you get into situations like this, where you are constantly retooling because of somebody higher up than you telling you what to pick and change. And I know Warner Brothers probably has notes on the stuff that he's doing anyway, but with his power, he gets to see his vision through, and might be one of the first directors ever to be able to do so because of every other director having someone above them to kind of mess up their deal.
Yeah, I was talking to some young guy at my job the other day who was already dismissing the new Superman movie, and I said, did you like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies? He's like, yeah, I love those movies. I go, the same guy who made those is making this. He's like, yeah, I know that. He go, so you like those three movies where he made you like a talking tree, a talking raccoon, a green guy, and like a misfit moron, essentially, but you're not going to trust him with the most iconic character of all time?
This is when he's going to drop the ball. This is when he's going to get lazy. When he's been handed the biggest job of his entire career, that's when he's going to start messing up. It doesn't make any sense to me. And to be honest, as I'm checking the temperature, I feel like the detractors have less and less of a foot to stand on. The more stuff comes out, the more that the cast talks about it. I'm seeing less and less acceptance of people just blatantly, for no reason other than engagement, trashing this film. And the thing is, again, like we said about the Elseworlds of it all, not every Superman film needs to be your Superman film. Not every Spider-Man film needs to be your Spider-Man film, or Batman, or whatever. But stop popping other people's balloons. You understand? If you had your balloon and you was rocking with it, you was chilling, your Superman is whoever the hell it was. No one's saying you can't come to the party. But if you're going to come to the party, don't sit there with your arms crossed and make boo-boo face and all that other kind of stuff. Like, we're here to have fun. That's what everyone is here to do. There's a lot of people who feel like that this Superman movie that's coming out is made out of spite. And it wasn't. Warner Brothers shook the Etch-a-Sketch that was the DC universe, and then they handed it to James Gunn, and he now has to do all this from scratch, and it's an unenviable task, and it's going to be downright impossible. But just like we saw in this documentary, when passionate people are confronted with the impossible, they find ways to make it possible, especially if they love this stuff. And that's what I want people to take away from this, is not to get discouraged, but realize when passion is real, it is trapped. It will stay wherever it is. It existed in those living drawings. You can see it when you look at the concept art. You can see it when you hear from the concept artist. Like, it's very evident about the passion that's put into these things. And because of it, that heart always beating, it ends up getting picked up and used in other very passionate projects, like Absolute Superman, like we were talking about with Lex and Brainiac in the animated series, like we were talking about with the spindly leg head thing. And I feel like that's a thing now in general. I feel like I've seen that in other stuff. Not
just other stuff. Even in the documentary stuff, they talk about how it worked in Johnny Quest.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
There's ways to make it work. And Wild Wild West showed there are ways to make it not work.
100%. And that's another movie that was probably just made for the money. He had just did a bunch of other buddy cop stuff, Bad Boys and Men in Black. So they just put him in a buddy cop in a Western, and it just didn't work because...
Yeah, I didn't understand the Matrix script, so I went and did this.
I signed up for Wild West. We all end up making mistakes. But yeah, go check this out. It's for free on YouTube. The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened. I think it's definitely worth checking out. And we will be returning next week to cover Truth, Red, White, and Black, the story of Isaiah Bradley, just in time for the 4th of July. We are at a very, very interesting time right now in this country, and I think that it's very interesting to tackle that book for 4th of July. If you have the pleasure of watching this on video, I am wearing a now defunct Comic Book Clique shirt. It's my illegal alien Superman shirt that I might be trying to bring back soon for 4 reasons. I made this years ago, but something tells me that the irony of people breaking the box office to go watch an illegal alien while ice raids are going on, just something about that just. Yeah, there's a little bit of irony there. So we might be getting that t-shirt back. But in a time where the world is uncertain, where World War III seemingly is on the brink, where no one knows what the hell Elon Musk is going to do next, you can set your watch to Comic Book Clique and the Major Issues podcast. We are doing this each and every week as a labor of love. All the episodes exist at comicbookclique.com. And if you go over there, it's the one-stop shop for everything that we do. Major Issues, all the episodes, over 388 episodes, over 700 hours of pure content, talking about the stuff we love, like, and the stuff we're a bit indifferent on, but it's been a pleasure to do. We have articles written there, and it's the way you can get to our shop, CBC shop, at our TeePublic store. If you buy a piece of merchandise there, we get a cutback from everything that goes on there. If you want to help us out more with money, become a Patreon. We're actually doing some behind the scenes litigation right now about, not litigation, behind the scenes discussions about what we could be presenting there at our Patreon, because people are donating and they deserve a little bit extra. You know, we give you guys a lot for free, and we don't, not saying that in a complaining sense. We want this. We don't want this to be pay for play. We want you guys to have fun in here. And if you guys want to buy a drink, if you guys want to buy us a beer or buy us a sandwich, you know, you do so out of the love for the game, because that's what we're doing this for, out of the love of the game. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Look, we're out of stuff. Come on, help us out. It's gonna be a crazy, crazy summer. I am expecting, you know, not to be cocky, but I think we're going to blow up this summer. Our numbers are climbing right now with all kinds of views and stuff all over social media. Facebook.com/comicbookclique, Instagram at comicbookclique, and use that hashtag comicbookclique to talk about the newest, hottest, latest, and greatest things to come to comic books and comic book media. Letting the cat out of the bag a little bit. I am putting more time towards Comic Book Clique than ever before. I know other people behind the scenes are doing the same. So get ready for a new influx of energy, of content, all that stuff. Like I said, free of charge. Major previews once a month. We got new comics with the Cog once a week. That's now becoming a YouTube series, so you can go ahead and check that out there. We're getting some awesome content from the folks over at Snap Judgments. That's been bonkers, revealing new cards every single Tuesday. We're becoming scheduled, you know, like every day, you know, turn on. Same bad time, same bad channel for Comic Book Clique.
Damn right.
And we're loving it. And it's been fantastic with the collaborations that not only we have just started to work on, but the collaborations we'll be working on in the future. So stay tuned for all that. Like I said, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. We're at Major Issue CBC on Twitter, at Major Issue CBC on Twitch. I've been to the future where we do become the hottest and latest, greatest thing to come to comic books and comic book media. We do so alongside the folks at Dirt Sheet Radio, who we share comicbookclique.com with. Those guys are the industry leaders in all things professional wrestling and pop culture. I love what they're doing over there. They're covering every single professional wrestling event. They're doing live results. They're doing live streams, talking about this kind of stuff. So it's been super exciting to be a part of that family there. They're kicking butt. And they are also dealing with a bunch of stuff right now because the Saudi Arabia shows are around the corner, and yeah, things around the world are not too great right now. But go ahead, give those guys some love. They work very, very hard over there at Dirt Sheet Radio to keep that afloat, and we love working alongside them. So go ahead and check that out. I've been to the future where we do become the latest and greatest things to come to comic books and comic book media, but I can't tell you how we do it because next thing you know, they'll change the timeline, and they'll, you know, The Rock will want to play Superman, and he tried. He tried. We saw this. We saw it happen with Black Adam. He really tried to play Superman. It didn't work. And then he was like, "Wouldn't it be cool if Superman was in that movie too? If I just put Superman in that movie? If I'm Black Superman and he's other Superman, yeah, doesn't work. It works with a collaborative effort, and that's what we have over here at ComicBookClique.com. So make sure that you guys are here next week and every single week for the Major Issues podcast, and show up for some of the live streams. We live stream on Facebook, Major Issues. every time we record it. The schedule's kind of trippy, but hang out with us. There's always room on the bandwagon. Get on it before it gets full.
Get on it.
Like I said, we're going to reach some very high places. So this grassroots part is the fun part. Then when we get too big for our high horse, we can't look down all the way down at everybody. It's going to be an issue. So come on now. Come on while the water's fine. And join us next week for more major issues. But I got nothing else left to say. But my name is George Serrano, a.k.a. The Don.
And I'm Alex Garcia, a.k.a. The Cog.
And this has been our The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened, Recap, and Review. And remember, whether you think that the spider is the most deadly animal in the animal kingdom, whether you think Superman should punch the head off a polar bear, that Brainiac should have little spindly legs, or that Nick Cage is the Superman that we all truly deserve, but just can't have right now. Remember that we are the Clique, and always remember that you, yes you, are worthy.